I'm going to welcome comments and questions from you guys. And I'm just going to warn you, if I don't get volunteers, I may pick on some of you. This is what I tend to do in my in-person workshops, and Zoom is no different. So, so the life of an associate or junior partner is never easy. I think we can all agree upon this. The pressures are super intense. The workflow never, ever ends. And it's difficult to understand the inner workings of our firms. Add in the current pandemic, the panic mode that most of our firms are in, and it feels impossible to get our heads above water. I'm sure we could all agree. This is a critical time for leadership. And let's face it, law school and most associate programs don't teach us leadership skills. They don't prepare us for this. So today we're going to discuss 3 essential components of growth-oriented leadership: advocacy, risk, and value. Then we'll share ideas on how younger attorneys can better position themselves as essential to their bosses and their firms. So let's start by talking about advocacy. As lawyers, you are programmed to advocate for others, but most of you are not so great at advocating for yourselves. Does this apply to any of you guys? Show a little finger if it does. Yeah. Thought so.
Yes.
So to build your confidence and your visibility as a leader, you must treat yourself as your most important client. To make this easier, I like to use an exercise that I call the Holy Trinity of Self-Advocacy. And for those of you who might have read my book, you're probably familiar with this. It's 3 very simple questions that most of us never take the time to answer. The first is, what do you care about? The second is, what do you fear? And the third is, what do you want? Very simple, but super important questions. And when you're responding to these questions, it's important to think about both your personal and your professional lives, which is something that a lot of attorneys struggle with, marrying the two. And I'm a big advocate for bringing your real self to work. And that's a struggle that lawyers of really all stages of their career struggle with. These questions are designed to reveal your values. So when we clearly define what's important to us, then we can actually move forward towards a plan of action to achieve our goals. The second question is maybe the most important question. Everything we do in life, both good and bad, is driven by fear. If we don't take the time to honestly understand what we're scared of, we're never going to be able to realize which fears are legit and which are just obstacles that we've created for ourselves. Do this exercise alone, do it with your partners, and also with your colleagues if you happen to lead or inspire a team. Has anybody ever done this kind of exercise? No? Okay. It is so revealing, and it's actually much harder to do than it sounds. And by the way, you do it often. It's not just like a one-time deal. A couple times a year would be helpful, especially now, I think, when everybody's hunkering down and we have time to think. This is the perfect time to go through this. It's also a very useful exercise for figuring out your career path. If you feel confused or frustrated about your current professional trajectory, which I'm not naming names, but I know that probably most attorneys I work with on a daily basis kind of feel a little bit of this. These 3 questions are great. It's a great way to figure out what you really want, and also the first step to getting there. So I see so many younger attorneys who expect their more senior counterparts to anticipate their needs and read their minds instead of taking an active role in their own careers. Well, no one's a mind reader. And if your supervisor is of a certain age, trying to be politically correct here, like a boomer or an older Gen Xer, they're likely not going to be as proactive as you'd like. And the reason for this is because when they came up, they weren't treated this way. They had to kind of fight for their own way, right? This probably sounds familiar to you guys. So if you want to play an active role in your firms, you need to jump in with both feet and ask how you can make a difference. The more seasoned attorneys are going to love you for this, and it's going to provide you the visibility that you need during this time of layoffs and pay cuts. Anybody have any questions about that? It can be really scary to do this, though. And I've had many, many clients admit to me that they're uncomfortable approaching their bosses in this way. For whatever reason, it feels kind of risky. So let's talk about risk. One of the most important traits as a leader is understanding your tolerance for risk. So I want to kind of throw it out to you guys. Anybody ever taken the time to think about how they feel about risk in their lives, professional and personal? Who here is a risk taker?
So.
Tessa? Okay.
It depends on context.
Yeah. Well, typically, most lawyers are not risk takers. You guys are in the risk mitigation business, no matter what area you practice in, right? So if you're constantly helping your clients to manage risk, it's hard necessarily to take the time to understand what your relationship with risk is. Mm-hmm. And these days, it's really important to be comfortable in taking more risks than we otherwise may have done before. So leadership is a very risky endeavor. If we have to make decisions that, for whatever reason, not everybody agrees with, we risk losing friends and potentially the appreciation of our peers. Anybody ever felt that fear? You know, the fear of not being liked for maybe making a tough decision? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard.
Yes.
But the mark of a true leader is someone that does what they know is right, even if by doing so, they risk their own popularity. So basically, just think about the opposite of what most of the world leaders are doing today and do that. Just saying, not getting political, but just, you know, do what you know is right, not like what everybody else thinks me. Because right now, we need real leadership, right? We need people who are willing to sort of put their fears aside and their insecurities aside and think about the greater good and take action. The COVID crisis makes us take another look at risk, and we have to consider the risk we take by not putting ourselves out there and stretching our comfort zone, which is a new way of thinking for most of us. The thing is, if we don't consistently demonstrate our willingness to roll up our sleeves and support our firms in any way we can, and I really mean pretty much any way we can, including coming up with ideas on creative new sources of revenue, which some of you may have not thought of before, we risk our job security. And that's the cold, hard reality of the period that we find ourselves in. Any questions about that? Any comments anybody wants to make? Has anybody pushed themselves out of their comfort zone and really make suggestions or made suggestions to your firm leadership about new sources of revenue or creative ideas on how the firm can survive this crisis? Anybody?
I'm trying to do more this year. Wait, yeah, it is off. I'm 10 years out from practice. I think now I've started to really think more about actively taking ownership of my career, my role in the firm. I'm in a niche field, and there's really geographically not opportunity to change right now. So for me, it's been the realization of what do I need to do to change my mindset about this risk, to make suggestions, even things like the other day LinkedIn has been a good source for me of ideas and fields and et cetera. And I follow like area business groups in Maine. And one of them posted a piece about a company that's in Maine, that's in an industry field that we're about to publish an article on. So sending that in, the post itself to my co-authors and the other senior managers in the firm, just saying, hey, once the article is published, we might want to send it to this company and just say, hey, you're in Maine, we're in Maine, here's our article, it might be of interest to you, as a way to, show that I'm trying to look for other opportunities in our state and in our field that may not be out there.
Jamie, is that something that you would have done pre-COVID?
Probably not.
Why not?
I mean, I might have, but It's hard to say because I was starting to get much more active on LinkedIn leading up to COVID. So I might have within the last 6 months, but before that, probably not. I think part of it was, in my firm, and I would say it's probably generational in who's managing it. There was a very active instruction to stay off social media.
Really?
And to not, yes. There was, and so.
What was the reason behind that?
They were concerned about security and confidentiality, and I'm not really quite sure what triggered this for them, but the management had said
fear, myopathy, the list goes on.
There was
I would say they fall into the boomer generation, and who knows beyond that, I don't know, but that stance within the firm shifted about 6 months ago. And so since then, since getting the all right, we're not going to actively turn our noses down on you for using LinkedIn, it has been a way for me to kind of spread a network that I don't otherwise have access to.
Jen, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say, I came across an article on LinkedIn yesterday, and it was kind of debunking the myths of Zoom's privacy issues. I'll share it with Wendy later if you want to pass it along to anybody, but I'm actually going to share it internally at my firm. Every Friday I put up, mind you, I'm not an attorney. I'm kind of crashing the party, but I work with attorneys on their client development. And admittedly, last night I couldn't sleep, so I was reading Wendy's book all night. I got halfway through. And one of the ideas that I came up with is being based in Wilmington, Delaware, we typically are the most profitable part of our firm typically acts as co-counsel for big law firms that come to Delaware who need navigation through the courts and whatnot. But one thing I was thinking about, Wendy, last night was the work that I'm doing with 2020 Women on Boards has afforded me access to a lot of other public companies that reside in Delaware, and starting to do some research on inroads to those corporations, because we know we're in the business of relationships, and I feel like that's been the mantra for the 20 years that I've been in the industry. We're in the business of relationships. Don't step on those relationships. People will recognize us just because we do good work. And I'm kind of feeling like now there's an opportunity here. We need to be a little bit riskier and, take the opportunity that this pandemic has created for us and use it to reach out to some of these contacts that are in our backyard. So that's what you did for me last night, Wendy.
Cool. Well, I'm sorry you had insomnia, but I don't know if I want to say I hope my book helped you fall asleep or help you stay awake. It's kind of
helped me think about things, so that's a good thing.
Which of course is going to prevent sleep, and I'm sure we've all had those nights recently, especially. So, thanks. Anybody else want to add a comment about risk or something maybe you've done a little differently with your firm since the beginning of this COVID madness? Anybody? No? Okay. So let's start talking about value, which is one of my very, very favorite subjects, or words rather. If you're anything like me, you were not raised to understand your individual value proposition. Many of us were taught to fit ourselves into boxes that others created for us. Does that sound familiar to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're raised in sort of a traditional family and you're female, for example, what were we raised to do? Serve others, put ourselves second, right? And in fact, there's a lot of guys that actually were raised that way as well. So we're very uncomfortable thinking about what we bring to the table because why? It somehow feels like we're bragging on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But here's what I'm going to tell you. Confidence is not arrogance. Okay? If we know our stuff and we know who we are and we know what our value is, if we do not take the time to understand and define, articulate, and promote our own unique value proposition, how the heck can we expect others to value us? It's impossible. We have to take the time to quantify our value and what we bring to the table. In my book, there's a bunch of exercises on this, and in my usual workshops, when we have more time together, I help people to walk through the process of figuring out what their value is. It's really hard to do. Again, if you're raised not to do it, it doesn't come natural to you. And particularly in the legal field, where we are, it's sort of stiff. We're in our silos. It's a traditional business model. We're programmed to sort of follow the way everyone else does things. It's really hard. It can get lost in the noise. So has anybody ever taken the time to think about quantifying what they bring to the table or what you're really worth to your firm? Anybody?
Yeah, I started to do that this year as part of this take ownership of myself risk.
Yeah. How'd you go about doing it? Any ideas to share?
We still work on a billable hour system. So I took a look at what my billing rates are, that was step one, finding out what my billing rates are, because I moved from the public sector to the private sector. And I am not the ones that draft our engagement letters for our clients. And until very recently, I wasn't pre-approving the bill. So I didn't know what my billing rates were. So one, go find out what your billing rates are. Then I got a report from our HR manager of the number of hours that I had billed of last year, and just did a very rough estimate, using what my billing rates are to the number of hours that were billed, and tried to estimate that conservatively in case there was, a change or a flat rate in that package. Or something where the senior partners may have adjusted the amount, but just to get a real rough estimate of kind of the value that I had brought into the firm.
Has anybody else done that?
So I'm familiar with what my rates are in the hours, but even this conversation, I feel like is part of the challenge for me, because there is a hyper focus on your billable hours and what your threshold is and how you're exceeding that. And so when you're trying to be creative about how you bring value, it's really hard to step outside of the box of your value is your time and, basically the dollar amount that you're making for the firm. So I found that to be really challenging to, get more creative than how many hours can I bill.
Well, I think that, first of all, I thank you for being so candid, Rachel, and I applaud your efforts, Jamie. I think that's great. And I think you've probably inspired some others on this call to start taking steps to understand better, to take more control over what they're making for the firm. But here's the hard part. Your value to your firm should not just be the money that you've actually billed, the revenue that you've generated through billing. Mm-hmm. That's a trap. Okay, lots of reasons for this. First of all, most firms are still figuring out bonuses based on some subjective, weird, hidden, not transparent formula, right? If you are only focusing on the actual money that's collected for the work that you're doing, you're missing a huge component. So what we're talking about today in terms of becoming more visible in your firm is really important. Also, just as an example, Jamie, when you talked about the step that you took on social media about sharing this with other businesses in Maine, that is value. That brings value to your firm. Difficult to quantify, of course, but it brings lots of value. So I would welcome you to think about the other things that you all are doing in your firm and for your firm, other than just the money that's being billed and collected, Because if you are only focusing on that, you're really doing yourself a disservice. It's not easy to do. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I welcome you all to really think about that. And if anybody wants to have a side conversation about this, send me an email and we can talk about it or set up a call, or maybe if there's enough interest, we could even set up another session and talk about this, because it's hard, but it's so, so important. So younger attorneys struggle a lot with this because we are focusing so much on the amount of experience we have, right? So if someone has 5 years experience, 8, 10 years experience, we get kind of intimidated by those that have 15, 20, 25 years of experience. Oh, I don't know as much as them. I can't bill as much as them because they've been around longer. But the thing is, especially now during COVID, that you have to stop focusing on how much experience you have and focus on the other things that you can bring to the table. So in other words, stop paying so much attention to what you've done and think about what you can do. This is critical, right? So if I could bring this whiteboard up thing here on Zoom, which I can't really figure out how to use, I would draw a picture for you guys, which is, you know, the image of an iceberg, right? We all know that the biggest part of the iceberg is, right? So the top part of the iceberg is what you've done, history, and experience, okay? But what's under the water is your talents, interests, passions, skills, your energy level, your work ethic, and the list goes on and on. Everybody has all this, but we're so programmed to think in this billable, hourly, just craziness, that we forget all the other stuff that's great that we bring to the table that maybe we were thinking about when we initially interviewed at a law school, right? We need to remember that. So this is a perfect time to take an inventory of all of the other things that you bring to the table besides your experience. Because right now, the experience doesn't really matter as much because nobody has ever gone through something like this, ever. So your value to your firm is, how can I pitch in with my inherent skills and talents, my interests, my passions, my energy level, my creativity, and really jump in and help to shepherd our firm through this difficult time. Okay? Any questions on that? Comments? Anybody ever thought about that before? No? Yeah?
Yes.
Want to tell us more?
Yeah. So I always felt like it's not always the money that one should be. It's like the mission. What are you driven for? That matters, because day to day it would feel like you are at something, and you inner reward as well. That growth you will feel on an inner level, that would give you a real feeling of achievement in a way. So that I felt like is absolutely important to figure out, like which direction you want to move and where do you exactly want to add value, so you'll go 100% on that direct direction, and more money would not be the only focus that would be there. So yeah.
So what you're talking about is impact, which is, for those of you who know me, one of probably my favorite word, I have to say, which is also why my book has the word in it. It's about impact. It's about, for younger generations, we really care about the impact we want to have. It's different than the way it used to be. Of course, we all want to make a good living. We want to, have a good lifestyle, but that's not totally what's driving us to do what we do. We actually want to make a difference. We want to be part of something bigger than us. But if we don't think clearly about the impact we want to have, how do we know how to get there, right? And a big part of this is figuring out what you can bring to the table to actually create this impact. And I'll tell you,
All right.
very little of that process or those efforts have anything to do with experience, truly. Instead of looking at the past, we got to look forward, especially now, and we have to be a lot more creative than we ever had to be before, which is a new frontier for law firms, frankly. You don't really hear the phrases game changer or disruptive used in law firms. By now, those are old terms, almost obsolete for people in the tech industry or any other startup space, but not law firms, right? So that's something to think about. So I'd love to hear questions from you guys about how to think about these things, how to be, how can you be a better leader in your firm? How can you make a difference right now? Maybe overcoming some of your fears of stepping out of your box or your comfort zone. Anybody have specific questions or comments they want to share with the group or looking for feedback? Don't be shy. Joe, you joined us, but you're on mute. I can see you though.
Got me.
All right. Well, got anything for us?
I think this was tying back into what we were talking about before in terms of value. And I mean, there's a tangible side, which is your billable hours, the amount of money you bring in. That's a pretty straightforward metrics.
Mm-hmm.
If you're billing at 300 an hour and you bill 2,000 hours, there's your number. But the intangible is the flip side of that. And I think that's one of the other things that can also add value. So for me personally, I try to establish relationships with younger attorneys. So I'm like a 9-year, right? So I'm getting a little long in the tooth. But but
I love that.
I don't know, some of the things that I try to do is I talk to like the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s, and try to instill in things in them that I kind of missed when I was at their level.
Like what?
So I try to tell them, focus a little bit less on the hours and more about the quality of the work that you're doing, the method that you're doing to get there. It's practice, it's law practice, not law perfect. So you have to kind of establish the things that bring you to where you're going. So in other words, get your forms together, get your kind of your own little personal library, if you will, as your practice tool, which is something that I've developed too, but not at the early stage. And it's one of the things that I regret. Really, like the first 3 years, all I was focused on was bill, hours, cut a little corner here, cut a little corner there, and it didn't hurt the firm or the client, it hurt me. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the things that I try to instill in a form of a mentoring, if you will, to some of the younger associates. And I've gotten pretty good feedback about it.
Yeah.
That's
I
excellent.
love that.
And I'll thank you for sharing that. And I warned you guys I was going to pick on you. So I was talking to an attorney the other day who is a rock star. This guy is he's amazing. He's incredibly successful. He runs his own firm. He's emotionally intelligent, and he's the kind of boss that you guys would want. He's with it. What he was sharing with me though, because we were talking about this very issue just in terms of, self-advocacy, things like that. And what he said was his biggest pet peeve is when he's working with younger associates who who don't take time, proofreading their work, for example, making grammatical mistakes or spelling errors or just little things. Or, if he was really clear with them about how he manages client relationships and sort of the tone to use and all these kinds of things, and they are not listening, and he has to keep wasting his time going back over their work, correcting things, the same things over and over again. And it obviously irritated him. It costs money, and he loses money on that. And he said, I really wish that, he called it a work ethic. I'm not so sure it's a work ethic question, but this was his term. I'm not so sure. He said, I really wish that before it came to me, they triple checked themselves and they thought a little bit, instead of, just kind of being robots, they thought more about what they were doing. And I thought that was interesting, and it's useful maybe to share on this call, because I think what you're talking about, Joe, and I think that kind of stuff happens a lot. And right now, that unfortunately many, many firms are, of course, doing cost-cutting measures, and nobody knows what the future is going to bring. If you're being kind of sloppy about stuff, your head's probably going to be on the chopping block, and that's not where you want to be. So I think it's more important than ever. It's a great point to really make sure your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, and actually, if you're feeling kind of unsure about your work, ask somebody. Like, hopefully people are asking you proactively, Joe, what do you think about this? I'm struggling with this. Do you think this makes sense? You know, before, so they can learn better what you want, or what a partner, a senior partner wants from them in terms of their work. But most people aren't asking. They're just waiting for directions. Yeah, Jen.
I was going to say, it's funny that your rock star had said this, because it's something I've been burned by a gazillion times. Because, you know, I have a way that I like to work, and they have a way that they like to receive product. And I really like doing something, like turn something around to them in 24 hours, and I clearly mark it draft, all capitals, highlighted in yellow. I know that it's not 100% perfect yet, but they'll come back with their red marker everywhere. And I'm like, I just wanted to make sure I was going in the direction you wanted me to go in. I wasn't submitting this to you as the final product. But now it's taken me a lot of time. I'm like, the partners just don't like to see a work in progress. They like to see like almost 100% complete, you know? So
And the reason is because it takes time, and time is money.
Yeah.
And it's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, you know, tying it back to the theme of this call, and how do you make yourself more valuable to your firm, right? And I guess it means more self-management, and thinking like, well, here's the thing. Thinking about the motivation and the concerns of those that you're working with, you know, so think about what your boss or bosses are concerned most with right now.
Mm-hmm.
They are terrified of losing money. It all comes down to money. We can talk about culture, we can talk about all the stuff, but they're really scared of losing clients, of losing revenue. It's terrifying for all of us. We're all in that boat, okay? So what can you do as a rising leader in your firm to help quell those concerns? That's the big question. And I would welcome you to have these, if you have a good relationship with the leadership in your firm. Of course, it depends on that. But I would welcome you to reach out and schedule a Zoom call, do it face-to-face, you know, not on the phone, and say, you know what, this is a scary time. I recognize that. What can I do that maybe I'm not already doing to really help you out and help the firm out?
I know
one thing that know the answer.
Sorry, Jen?
If they don't know that answer,
it doesn't matter. You've already established that you are invested, and you've done what you needed to do, which I'm on your radar now. I'm in. Whatever, you know, and then also ask them, if I have ideas, do you want to hear them? You've now opened that door, and that's all you need to do. Kirby, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I know with our firm, I'm on the business team. So a lot of our focus has been on assisting clients with the stimulus package. And I've not been as involved in that process. Our tax attorneys have been. And so, but one thing that we've been doing is reaching out to clients. Like, it's non-billable. You can't, you know, you can't bill your client for reaching out and saying, just checking on you, or is your family safe? But continuing to establish those relationships that we have, even as an associate, that our partners are really good about on the business team, getting us involved and getting us connected and developing those relationships with their clients. And so just, even if they hear from both of us, at least they know that we care about them and we're thinking about them and how some things may help them with their business, even though it's currently not profitable for us, but it may be in the future.
I can guarantee you that it will be. It's not a question of maybe. It will be profitable in the future. It's making these investments now to secure long-term sustainable growth. It's great that your firm encourages you to do that, but I know that many firms have attorneys that are, shall we say, very territorial about their clients. And much to the frustration and disappointment of their associates or junior partners, that they're not allowed essentially to have access directly to the clients. So the question is, what do people do then? And I think that, you can't force the issue. I think that, like I said to Jen, the most important thing is opening up that dialogue and saying, I'm interested in doing anything I can to help us to grow or just sustain what we've got right now. And I want to help you to manage clients at whatever level you're comfortable with. Please let me know. I'm here. I'm at the ready. I'm here to support you. Let me know what I can do. And if I come up with ideas, would you like to hear about them? Because I think that you're in a rare situation, Kirby. Your firm has a very healthy approach to that. Unfortunately, many firms do not, which is a huge problem in the legal space. And if that's the case, you don't have as much control over it. But as I said, if you bring it up and you start the conversation and the dialogue, this will bode well for you career-wise.
Yeah.
Rachel, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry. No, I was adjusting. And it probably
Okay. Anybody else have any tips they want to share, kind of like what Joe shared, or things that have worked in their firms, or even challenges that they've had, maybe when they've tried to do this and it didn't work so well? Anyone?
Well, I'll say pre-COVID, we were kind of sitting down as a team. And like I said, I know that being a business attorney is a little bit different than litigators and things like that. We have a much more team approach to things at our firm. And so we were kind of talking about some things that we can be doing, and we came up with a suggestion to hold just kind of a conference for existing clients and new clients on bond issues. Well, I'm 4 years in, and I made the suggestion, and they were like, great, go for it, run with it, do whatever. So so they let me put on a seminar, and we were able to get CLE credit for city attorneys and things like that. And it was a half-day event. We catered food. They let me make have custom cookies made. I mean, they supported this this area that I really wanted to focus on for my practice, and brought in a bunch of different trustees and underwriters and that sort of thing. And they allowed me to do this and funded it, knowing that it was non-billable, but developing those relationships with clients, and then hopefully gaining some new clients by showing that we have the capacity and the knowledge to be able to help help different municipalities. So that was something that it was kind of out of the box thinking, and for our team to be able to put this on. But it was, we all got up there, we all presented, and it was a lot of fun too. So that was kind of something that they let me do. That was different.
Well, kudos.
Kind of hard to do now through Zoom, but
what you did is awesome. I mean, wow, that's fantastic, especially at 4 years in. So you took a risk in doing this, right? So here I'm going to throw a hard question at you.
mm-hmm.
How do you know it was successful?
We have, for me particularly, this is, we kind of have an age gap between our partners and then our associates. We kind of don't really have a middle group. So for us as associates, it's really trying to develop that knowledge and that skill set, and then, becoming more of a client contact. So for me, it was being able to be more of a client contact. After that meeting, they saw that that I was kind of the one moderating. And so I'm being the person that they're reaching out to and not my partner as much, which he's thrilled about. Like I said, we have a really good environment with that, with our partners. And so being able to be the person that they go to, I may not know the answer. A lot of times I don't, but allowing that as an opportunity for him to mentor me and teach me about that area and being able to be responsive to the client. So, and then having other cities that were invited, that whether or not they showed up or not, they reached out to us to assist them with other bond issues. So it was successful in that sense. It wasn't immediate, but even showing that our existing clients that we have a team. We have, there were 7 or 8 of us presenting that day and are available for questions and just getting to have some face-to-face time.
So I want to invite you to think about 2 things. One is quantifying that experience in terms of your value to the firm. Okay, so sort of make a note to yourself, okay, I came up with this idea. Here's how it went. Here's what it costs to do this. Here's what we got out of it, right? Make a mental note of that, if not a real note of that, because this goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is really understanding and quantifying your value to the firm. And what you were talking about has nothing to do with billable hours, okay? And it's about business development. And, that's my religion. And I am all about measuring things. It's about return on investment. So you need to think about what your contribution did directly for the firm. And then you also need to think about what follow-up looks like. So, okay, we spent this much money, we did cookies, we did all this. It took this much time to put into this program. Here's what the result was. And I'm making this up. We invited 12 people to this thing and it was great and they loved it. And then we followed up with it after and sent messages and said, what did you think of it? Any feedback? And then start to track the relationship development with each one of those participants. Not necessarily is business coming out of it, because I think that is a bit short-sighted. Because you're looking for long-term development, right? So I would welcome you to start thinking about things in terms of creating more structure around what you're doing. And this goes for everybody. Think about the return on your investment of time, energy, creativity. Because chances are, even if you work at a great firm, you're not necessarily going to get the attaboys that you want or need. So you're going to have to do it for yourself. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so I think this is a brilliant point, because I also feel that this is actually the time where you can show your loyalty to the firm. Like, this is a time you can give back and add the support for whatever that you have received from your firm in terms of mentorship or just a job security. I mean, this is a time to show your leadership to your organization. This is the real test of the time. So,
it's true. And I think that for anybody who's listening, who might be in a job search at the moment, this applies to that as well. Because there are firms that are still hiring. There still are organizations that are hiring that need to do business. And when you are preparing to interview, you have to be able to sell yourself. You have to be able to quantify your value. So as an example, Kirby, I'm not saying you're leaving your firm, but the what you did for the firm, right? You need to be able to say, here's who I am. Here's what I've done. Here's why I did it. Here's what the results were. We have to get really good at doing that. Okay. And that goes for everybody. So we're coming to the end of our session now. Everybody's super busy, I know, and I appreciate you hanging out with us for this long. Just to summarize, now is the best time for those of you who have maybe not exercised your leadership muscles to do so, for job security, for personal growth, for professional growth, all these reasons. Remember these 3 components of leadership, which is advocacy, being your own best client, right? Don't just think about your clients. Certainly keep thinking about them, but you need to think about yourself as a client. What would you do to best advocate for yourself? Think about the three questions I mentioned, the holy trinity of self-advocacy, which again is, what do you care about? What do you fear? And what do you want? Do this on your own, do it with your partners, your families, do it with your teams to better understand each other, because you're going to have shared goals and you can't get there unless everybody's aligned. Think about the impact that you want to have. You got to identify that before you can come up with a roadmap on how to get there. And you want to think about risk. What's your relationship with risk? Think about what you're really scared of and why you're scared of it, and how, think about risk to reward, essentially. And value, the most important thing. Again, if you can't see the value that you bring to the table, how can others see it? So if you need help working through that, I'm happy to connect with you guys. The reason I like to do this in a group forum is because now hopefully all of you will want to connect with one another. And we've created now new stakeholders in each one of your success. That's the beauty of these group interactive workshop type sessions. And I'm sure that you all could help one another to better articulate your value. Have conversations, role play, rely on each other. You've all got your fingers on the pulse of what's going on. And there's definitely strength in peer support, which is something that I'm a huge believer in. And unfortunately, a lot of lawyers struggle with that because you are sort of trained and programmed to be very siloed, very proprietary, very private. But especially I think now more than ever, the strength of peer relationships is critical, and it's invaluable. So for those of you who aren't connected, my email is wendy@strategyhorse.com. I'm happy to connect you with one another. I hope that you found this valuable, and I certainly enjoyed speaking with you guys and hearing about your experiences and learning from you. And stay tuned, because I'm going to keep doing these sessions on a weekly basis, different topics. And if anybody has an idea for a topic, shoot me a message. I welcome your feedback and your input, and appreciate everything that all of you are doing during this weird time. Wishing everybody well and good health. And let's stay in contact.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.